Israel and Hezbollah on the brink of war as heavy cross-border ongoing exchanges are underway. The uptick follows the IDF targeted killing of a top Hezbollah commander. In retaliation, Hezbollah is intensively targeting the Upper Galilee and the Golan regions of Israel, firing some 200 missiles into the region. The defense minister says Israel is ready for war. ILTV's Steve Leibovitz reports.
More than 100 rockets were fired at the north following an airstrike that targeted and killed a senior Hezbollah commander. In the hours following the airstrike, barrages of rockets were fired from Lebanon at Kiryat Shmona and other areas in the Galilee Panhandle and at northern Golan. The IDF said that most of the rockets struck open areas. There were no reports of injuries. Amid the shelling, Defense Minister Yoav Gallant said Israeli forces would be ready to take any action necessary against Hezbollah, although Israel would still prefer to reach a negotiated deal.
אנחנו מכים את חיזבאללה כל יום, מכות קשות מאוד. ואנחנו גם נגיע למצב של מוכנות מלאה לעשות כל פעולה שנידרש בלבנון, או להגיע להסדרה מעמדה של כוח. אנחנו מעדיפים הסדרה, אבל אם המציאות תחפה עלינו, אנחנו נדע להילחם.
The senior commander was identified as Mohammed Niman Nasser, who led the terror group's Aziz unit. He was targeted in Tyre, about 20 kilometers north of the Lebanese border. He was one of the highest-ranking officials in the terror group to be killed in the 9 months of fighting along the border. Since 2016, Nasser commanded Hezbollah's Aziz unit, responsible for Lebanon's southwestern region from the coast to Bint Jabal. Under his command, hundreds of attacks were carried out against northern Israel's upper and western Galilee in the past 9 months.
And day 272 of the war in Gaza, and low-intensity clashes are ongoing in several areas. The fighting continues amid a report of a potential breakthrough in hostage-for-ceasefire negotiation. ILTV's Steve Leibovitz reports.
In Shajaiya, units from the 98th Division continue fighting above and below ground. In the last day, fighters eliminated dozens of terrorists in face-to-face encounters with tank fire and Air Force attacks. In Rafah, fighters of the Nachal Brigade's combat team under the command of Division 162 used a drone to eliminate a number of armed terrorists who posed a threat to IDF forces in the area. In the center of the Gaza Strip, forces from the 99th Division eliminated several terrorists and destroyed terrorist infrastructure with Air Force aircraft strikes. Over the past day, fighter jets and aircraft of the Air Force have eliminated dozens of terrorists and destroyed more than 50 additional terror targets throughout the Gaza Strip. 2 soldiers were reported killed in the clashes. The fallen were identified as Captain Roy Miller, 21, a platoon commander in the Givati Brigade's Rotem Battalion from Herzliya, and Captain Ilay Elisha Lugassi, 21, a team commander in the 7th Armored Brigade 75th Battalion from Kiryat Shmona. The toll of fallen in the ground offensive against Hamas in Gaza and in military operations along the border is now 324. Meanwhile, there's been some movement reported in the latest Hamas response on hostage-for-truce talks. An Israeli official said Hamas's latest proposal gives room to move forward toward a deal. After several weeks of deadlock since the terror group's last response, officials now say the response was positive enough to allow for the negotiations to renew. The differences reportedly focus on 2 clauses of the agreement. Israel has insisted on keeping the wording in these 2 clauses vague enough to allow it to resume fighting against Hamas in Gaza if it chooses. Hamas wants to ensure that Israel will not be able to resume fighting once the sides agree to the initial 6-week phase of the ceasefire deal. The Israeli government is expected to decide in the coming days whether to enter a new round of more detailed negotiations with the Qatari, Egyptian, and American mediators.
July 7th will mark 9 months since the October 7th massacre by the Hamas terrorist organization. 9 months of war, 9 months that 116 hostages are still being held in Gaza. The IDF has announced a shift to Phase 3, but reiterates the war is still far from over. On this occasion, a major march, a major protest, is being organized, marking a split in Israeli society once again. Joining us now in the studio are 2 mothers of IDF soldiers who for the better part of 9 months have been on duty. two mothers with shared experiences, but with very different outlooks on the war. So I'd like to welcome Sarah Sassoon and Mol Shamgar. Thank you both for joining us today.
Thank you.
So Sarah, let's start with you. Why don't you tell me a little bit about your son? How long has he been serving in Gaza?
So my son began last March. He's in Sadir, which means he began his military service then. He's in elite paratroopers. And yeah, when he began, we had no idea there would be a war. And yeah, when October 7th happened, he was at home with Simchat Torah, and that was it. He got up, got dressed in his fatigues, and was gone. That was the beginning of, the reality of having a son, not just in the army, but at war. And he's been in and out of Gaza since then. And he's in Gaza at the moment, in Sadia, as we speak.
Absolutely. And Mo, the same question to you. Why don't you tell me a little bit about your son? I know he was also serving in the north.
Yeah, he's in reserve. He's 27, going on 27. He's a tank commander. He was in the north for 155 days, came back, he's a student, and now he's been there for a month, and they talked to him about October, November again. But when Sarah was speaking, it reminded me that I was a soldier in '82 war, and my boyfriend was wounded in the war. So this whole cycle of war after war. My father was wounded in '73 war. So it's like this perpetual, we're basically in a perpetual war. You don't sleep well. We can lie, but we wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and somehow find something to read or pray or do mantra. My son will come back my son will come back healthy. My son will come back healthy. My son will come back healthy. Or you do Reiki, or everybody has their own thing. Some people cook, I know, but you don't sleep well. I don't think men sleep well as well. I think men who've been to the army, whose sons are there, are even worse than the mothers.
It's the perpetual or the realities of life in Israel, unfortunately. Yeah. And Sarah, turning back to you, so you penned an opinion piece just yesterday about what it's like to be the mother of an IDF soldier, what it's like, in today's reality, and why you will not be attending this protest or any other protests during a time of war. Can you perhaps share your thoughts with us, maybe elaborate a little bit?
Okay. So I had the stance from the very beginning of the protest movements in response to the government. It wasn't a political stance not to go to the protests. I wouldn't go to the right or the left because when I went to one of the right protests, because I was curious, what are they saying? There was no call for unity. And without the call for unity, I couldn't respect them. And this was across the board. There was no call for unity. And I was feeling, also with my background, I'm an Iraqi Jew. My father's from Baghdad. They all came in 1951, all my grandparents. And they experienced the experience of the Jews from Arab lands in Israel. They were living in refugee camps. They had nothing. And I was seeing with the protests that the Middle Eastern way of being that I come from as a Middle Eastern Jew wasn't being represented, which is that we really take the middle path. We really believe in unity at all costs. That for us is the most important thing. If you're a Jew, you're a Jew. No matter what you think or you feel or your ideology, you're a brother, you're a sister. And I wasn't feeling that from the protests. It felt like it was threatening our security before October 7th. I heard at the time from Lebanon, the Palestinians were saying, pack your bags, we're going home. Because they saw the disunity in Israel. And in the Arab world, that is a sign, disunity. It's like they look at everything like chamulas, like families. If there's disunity and there's no authority figure, that means there's a gap in power and they can enter. And they're right. Mm-hmm. And they were right. October 7th happened. So now I'm like wondering, well, the protests didn't work before. How are they going to work again? So I can't support something that doesn't take a different stance, a different view, at least in perspective or nuance or energy. It's something that is much more loving and uniting. So that's what I would like.
And Mo, let's turn to you because you have a little bit of a different outlook. I know we spoke previously and you've been critical of the government, especially now, for example, of the new draft law that's being proposed. I mean, what's your take? And also when you hear from Sarah.
What's amazing is I identify with her completely from a different angle. Like, she's right that we should have unity. She's right that together we stand, united we fall. She's absolutely right. The thing is, you blame the protest, not what happened beforehand. So it's like you blame the victim and not the oppressor, which is a strange thing. But altogether, I relate to her that both sides are drumming the drums of war and not the drums of unity from all spectrum of Israeli society. But if you ask me about, so I'm an ex-Likudnik. I was a Likud. I left when the current Netanyahu came in because I don't believe in him. When you see reality, put the draft beside, put the protest beside, you see reality now. The new draft law is a truthful manifestation of the way he divides and conquers. He divides the people. He says, you don't have to serve, you serve. And then he divides and conquers. That's what he's doing. And he's doing it, and he's hurting the people of Israel and the only Jewish state. And that's something I can't take, because you can't endanger us as a people and then argue the protest is doing what? He's the prime minister. It's his role to bring people together. It's his role not to divide us. It's his role to make legislation that is acceptable, that is mending wounds, that is bringing people together, and not saying, okay, I'll pass laws that suffocate with it. This doesn't help.
Okay, well, we're almost out of time, but I do want to try and end on a positive note. You know, Sarah, you spoke about the importance of unity. I mean, are you hopeful that Israelis will once again be able to stand united, especially in the face of Hamas and potentially Hezbollah in the north and you know, all the fronts that we're seeing today?
I really feel that every person's going to have to answer that for themselves. Every person's going to have to choose. Am I going to go out onto the streets and shout and scream and create more energy of hate and blame? Or am I going to go out and say, what I want is to call you my brother. What I want is to call you my sister, no matter what your ideology, no matter what law is passed, because the hateful energy is only going to destroy us. We need to learn how to create a sense of, we want a new government, yes, that will pass laws that serve all of us and unite us. Yes, the government should be calling out for unity. It is their responsibility. But it's our responsibility still as a society to choose that we will even be better than them, that we will stay united no matter if they want to divide and conquer. We will not be divided. And that's what counts to me, and that's what's important, because as one person, I'm quite powerless. But together, if we put our heads together and if we pressure the government to listen to us, but in a loving way, without putting their backs against the wall and creating this hysteria that really creates so much alienation within us, that would be so much better. It would be so much healthier.
And Mo, I just want to give you a final thoughts.
Words are nice, very nice words, and I believe her, and I relate to her, and I wish I could say the same. I think we should hold our government accountable, and even more so. I think when you have a Likud party, the first time in history that a nationalist party is against its own military. The Likud is against the IDF. It's calling the army says we need such and such soldiers, and they're voting for a law that's against the soldiers of the IDF. So her son will do 4 years of regular army. My son will do 200, 250 days a year. For how long? So if we have an extended war, you can't, what happened before 7th October was a different story. You can't ignore it anymore. And the Likud is voting against the IDF and the IDF soldiers. This is not unity. I mean, it's nice to speak, but you need soldiers to protect the unity of the people. So I'm sorry. I agree. We agree to disagree, as they say in America.
Well, it is absolutely a difficult time, an emotional time for all of us, and especially for you with sons serving in the IDF. So thank you both so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And moving on, anti-Israel protesters climbed the roof of Australia's Parliament House in Canberra and unfurled black banners accusing Israel of war crimes and calling for the elimination of the State of Israel. Footage showed a small group of people dressed in dark clothes with their faces masked on the roof of the building in what has been deemed a serious security breach. The banners unfurled, including one reading, "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free," the common chant calling for the elimination of Israel, and also included a red triangle, the symbol used by terrorist group Hamas to mark its targets. One of the protesters gave a speech with a megaphone saying they would continue to resist. After the demonstration, the protesters packed up their banners before being led away by police. The Australian Home Affairs spokesperson said an investigation into the incident and how they were able to breach security and access the Parliament building would be required.
In medieval times, blood libels ignited pogroms that shattered our people. And now echoes of these lies persist in new blood libels. On college campuses, online, in the media, and halls of power, Jewish communities are facing this haunting echo of history once again. That's why we must speak out and make our voices heard. Today, there is only one organization that truly brings together Jewish communities from more than 100 countries and effectively elevates the voices of young leaders standing on the front lines in this battle for our survival: the World Jewish Congress.
And now, on the eve of its 4th of July Independence Day holiday, the United States has announced that U.S. President Joe Biden and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will meet in Washington later this month on the sidelines of the Israeli leader's trip to address a joint session of Congress. This, as the Prime Minister wrote a column thanking the American people for their support in the spirit of 1776. ILTV's Steve Leibovitz reports.
In a column published by the Jerusalem Post for the U.S. Independence Day holiday, Prime Minister Netanyahu wrote, "The U.S. stands with Israel because Americans are similarly moved by the legacy of their forefathers. On this 4th of July, I want to thank the American people for being true to their birthright, the spirit of 1776, and wish them a happy and blessed Independence Day. Through thick and thin for the past 9 months, Israel has deeply appreciated vital American support," Netanyahu wrote. Meanwhile, the White House announced that U.S. President Joe Biden and Prime Minister Netanyahu will meet in Washington later this month on the sidelines of the Israeli leader's trip to address a joint session of Congress. Netanyahu last saw Biden in October when the U.S. president visited Israel and met with him in September in New York, when they both attended the opening sessions of the United Nations General Assembly. The two men have a strong personal relationship that goes back 4 decades, but tensions, first over Netanyahu's judicial reform plan and then over the Gaza war, prevented Biden from inviting the Israeli leader to the White House. It's being reported that Netanyahu will travel to Washington for the first time on Israel's Wing of Zion, the official state aircraft. The plane built for Prime Minister Netanyahu had been collecting dust after being handed over to the Air Force several years ago and has never been officially used. The Boeing 767 was outfitted at a cost of hundreds of millions of dollars, and it's meant to fly the president and prime minister on official visits.
And today marks the 4th of July. The United States is celebrating its 248th birthday, and I want to wish the United States a happy Independence Day. America and Israel have always had a strong and close relationship. It is a relationship founded on shared values of liberty, of democracy, and of freedom. It's no secret that Israel relies heavily on the United States for support, whether diplomatically or militarily. And this support is even more critical today as Israel finds itself in a war against a brutal enemy intent on seeing not only the destruction of Israel, but that of the entire Western world. Since its founding, the U.S. has always stood by Israel, and it has continued to do so since October 7th, despite the disagreements, and yes, there have been quite a few. Yet, in a world with international institutions so clearly lacking a moral compass, American leadership, clarity, and strength are needed more than ever. America's strength is Israel's strength, and Israel's prosperity is the Western world's prosperity. They are intrinsically tied. As Israel stands on the front lines of the war, the United States-Israel bond stands at the forefront. This is an unwavering bond. This is why the U.S. must fully support and allow Israel to finish the job in Gaza and root out the Hamas terrorists that are responsible for the deaths of so many Israelis and Palestinians alike. This is why it is so important for the United States to stand strong and firmly against the Islamic Republic of Iran, whose main goal, and it admits this openly, is the destabilization of the entire Middle East and the destruction of Israel and of the United States. When the United States of America stands strong, history has shown that other countries follow suit and that the world is a better place. And so today, as America celebrates its Independence Day, I wish this great nation continued strength, success, and prosperity. And now, if you're not a new subscriber, you may remember the Hebrew word of the week, where each week, along with eTeacher, we learn a new Hebrew word and relate it to the Bible, current affairs, and our everyday lives. For more info on the Rosen School of Hebrew, please scan the QR code on your screen or click the link in the description.
Welcome to Hebrew Word of the Week. I'm Ariella, and in this segment, together with eTeacher, we explore the beauty and depth of the Hebrew language. We'll learn a new Hebrew word or phrase and see how it's used in the Bible, current events, and everyday life. Today's Hebrew word is mivtza. It means operation or sale in Hebrew. Mivtza refers to a planned and coordinated activity or campaign, often with specific objectives and goals. It can denote military operations, medical procedures, or any strategic initiative. The word mivtza is commonly used in Hebrew to describe various types of operations. In a military context, mivtza can refer to a specific mission or tactical maneuver. In civilian contexts, mivtza can describe organizational efforts, projects, or interventions aimed at achieving specific outcomes. Here are some examples of how the word mivtza can be used in a sentence. המבצע הצבאי הושלם בהצלחה, meaning the military operation was completed successfully. Or, יש בקניון המון מבצעים לחגים, meaning there are lots of holiday deals at the mall. So if you're interested in learning more about the Hebrew language, check out eTeacher. This online and live course is the most established Hebrew language instruction institution. You can learn with a time-proven method for every level or start from scratch. eTeacher offers dynamic online courses with live video lessons, weekly webinars, and ample support, and allows you to connect to a lively global community for an enriched learning experience. Scan the QR code or click the link below and visit the eTeacher website today to learn more. I hope you enjoyed learning about the Hebrew word mivtza. Please join us next week for another episode of Hebrew Word of the Week. And in the meantime, I encourage you to practice using the word mivtza in your own life, and feel free to share your experience with us in the comments below.
And now, let's take a look at the weather forecast. Mostly clear skies are expected tonight around the country, with temperatures set to reach lows of 23 degrees Celsius or 74 degrees Fahrenheit. Tomorrow, the heat wave in Israel continues as we'll see sunny skies and hot temperatures at highs of 35 degrees Celsius or 94 degrees Fahrenheit. Temperatures will drop slightly on Saturday and rise again for next week. And that's a wrap for today's news. For the latest updates from Israel on all your devices, be sure to follow our ILTV channels, subscribe to our newsletter, and explore our website, iltv.tv. Stay informed with the latest news straight from the heart of Israel. I'm Ladar Gervais-Lazi. Be well, stay safe, and thank you so much for watching.